Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Kristen and today is a new pen day. But instead of focusing on the unboxing experience, I really wanted to focus more on the writing experience of this fountain pen and how it looks next to some other fountain pens in my collection. This is the Sailor 1911 Realo fountain pen. It is in a dark green demonstrator finish, gold trim. And so with this fountain pen, the 1911 style, it's got the rounded finials. Now, because this is a demonstrator pen, I can see like all of the internal details of this fountain pen. And so the Realo style of fountain pen means that this is a piston fill fountain pen. So it does not have a converter or space for a converter on the inside. It actually has a piston knob, and the piston is a little white bit right there inside the body of this fountain pen. And I am so excited to use this one. This is my first ever Realo or piston fill fountain pen by Sailor. I purchased it with a medium nib. I am seeing a lot more detail than I thought I would right here in the section. I don't know if I can show you because it is such a very dark green resin. Oh man, I feel, at least on the section, I can feel the injection molded, like the seam right here. And then on the other side, I can feel the seam as well. Yeah, so that's not something that I am very pleased about, but it's still a really nice pen. I really like the color of this fountain pen. And it is so interesting to see like all of the internal parts of this pen. The little piston knob that goes up and down, and then the little mechanism down here, even down to the little bit at the very end. So that's basically the pen. A beautiful olive green colored fountain pen. It is very deep dark green. Let's see if I can give you a white background so you can better see and understand the depth of color. Hopefully that will help you see like exactly how dark this thing is. It's a gorgeous pen, gorgeous color. I'm so very happy that I have it as part of my collection now. And I want to bring out some additional Sailor 1911 fountain pens so that you can see the difference between this one and a cartridge or converter fill fountain pen. This is the 1911 large cartridge or converter fill fountain pen. They are basically the same height. The cap looks exactly the same on these two fountain pens. The gold trim looks the same. The only difference that I can spot right now from first glance is the location of this trim ring right here. The piston knob is larger on the Realo fountain pen so that you can get a good grip to operate that piston system. And then over here, this little blind cap or false blind cap, if you want to call it that, is much smaller because it's basically decoration at this point. There's no need for it to be as large, this section to be as large or long as it is on the Realo fountain pen. They're both 21 karat nibs, exactly the same size. Nothing is different about those two except the fact that this is an extra fine nib and my Realo nib is a medium nib. The trim ring right here at the edge of the section right above the threads are in the same spot. The threads for the cap are exactly the same. This ink window right here is exactly where this little blank space is on the 1911 large. So I think that's pretty interesting. All right, so that is a comparison between the cartridge converter fill 1911 large and the Realo version of the 1911 large. Okay, so now that I've done a comparison with these two fountain pens, my new one and one that is relatively new to me, I want to do some writing samples with a few of my Sailor fountain pens. I know that I do appreciate the feedback of my Sailor fountain pen nibs, and sometimes I have a preference for the nib width, like extra fine, fine, medium. I purchased this fountain pen with a medium nib because I know that I really enjoy using the Sailor medium nibs. But I really want to know, is the medium nib my favorite Sailor nib? We shall see. I want to do some writing samples with my medium nib, with this extra fine nib. I've got a fine nib as well. So I've got an extra fine Sailor nib. I've got a fine Sailor nib. This is a medium Sailor nib, and my friend Nadia is letting me borrow her medium fine Sailor nib. So these are all 21 karat gold Sailor nibs. 3 of these are Sailor 1911 larges. This is a Sailor Pro Gear, but they all have 21 karat gold Sailor nibs. And I want to know, do I prefer this medium nib overall? I know that I like it, but I really like this one and I really like this one. So I want to do some writing samples to see if the Sailor medium nib is actually my favorite. This is not like an unbiased video. If you want a more thorough examination of the Sailor nibs, I would highly recommend that you check out Yoseka Stationery's video. You can also check out the information that Goulet Pens has on their website. But this is really just trying to figure out what my personal preferences are regarding Sailor nibs. And I wanted to make sure that I did this comparison with all 21 karat gold nibs or all 14 karat gold nibs. But because of the kindness of my friend Nadia, I've got at least 4 of these nibs in 21 karat gold. So every single one of these pens is empty right now. And I am going to use, for my test, Pelikan 4001 Brilliant Brown, my most reliable brown ink. I'll be testing these pens with that ink on Tomoe River paper and Aerofil paper. Okay, so I'm just going to dip this one because I don't have a converter for it. First up is the extra fine nib. Gorgeous, very nice. This is the fine nib. Wow. What I noticed right away is that I can use more pressure on the paper. I can press down a little bit harder, a little bit more securely with this fountain pen with a fine nib than I can with the extra fine. I feel like if I press down too hard here with the extra fine nib, there's going to be much more feedback bordering on scratchiness. So I really do like how this one feels on paper. I love the look of this one, the crispness, and how fine and how accurate I can get with the extra fine nib, but I really love how it feels writing with this fine nib. And I also know that this is an excellent writing fountain pen because it was tuned and smoothed by Mr. Mike Masayama. Okay, so now I'm going to try out Nadia's medium fine nib. I'm not too sure about this medium fine. I feel like I'm just repelled by the medium fine nibs. There is some combination of scratchiness and feedback with this medium fine, and I'm not sure how to describe it. And it also looks like it's a drier writing fountain pen than this fine nib, which is, you know, it could also be the fact that this was tuned and smoothed, and the fact that this is only dipped. This was a dipped fountain pen, and it was not filled by a cartridge with a cartridge. All right, so here is the medium nib on the Realo. Oh my goodness, juicy. This feels really thick and juicy. Oh my gosh. Okay, that's a thick, juicy medium nib. I kind of like it. And what I want to do is bring out another medium nibbed fountain pen, ink it up, and see if it even makes a difference between whether or not it's a piston fill pen or a cartridge converter fill pen. So I've got a Sailor Pro Gear with a medium nib, and I want to compare it with this one. All right, so here is my converter filled 21 karat gold medium nib. Huh. Okay. So it looks to me like there is a difference between these two nibs. So here is the extra fine nib. That's the fine nib, medium fine, medium, Realo, and medium converter filled Pro Gear. Why does it look like I used 5 different brown inks though? Or at least 2 or 3 different brown inks. It was the lightest here and the darkest with this fine nib. I really feel like this is a wet writing fountain pen. That is gorgeous. That's so beautiful. This medium fine, I'm not too fond of the feedback on this one. This Realo medium nib looks and feels like it could be a broad nib. And I wish I had a broad nib in my collection so that I could compare it, but I do not have one yet. We'll see if I actually add one to my collection sometime in the future, but I really feel like this looks and feels like a broad nib. Now let me make sure that it actually has an M on the side of the nib. Yeah, okay, so yes, it is a medium nib. It's a thick medium nib. And I'm actually okay with that because I really wanted a Sailor Realo with a broad nib, but this one only came in a medium, so that's why I got the medium. This Sailor Pro Gear Stellar Black Hole with a medium nib, this is the Japanese medium nib that I'm accustomed to experiencing, and that is definitely broader, a little bit wetter. I can see more shading here with the converter medium nib, but wow, I didn't even realize that there could be such, I guess, discrepancies between these Sailor nibs. All right, so the thinnest is the extra fine. Oh, no, that's the fine nib. Oops, there we go. This is the extra fine nib cartridge converter. And then we've got, even though it's wetter, and it probably looks a little bit broader than normal because this pen has been adjusted to write so wet. But the next one up is the fine nib, a cartridge converter pen. And then you've got that medium fine nib. It was actually dipped. And then after that, this is the medium nib cartridge converter. And then the most broad of the 5 is the Piston. That's what we've got. Looking at all 5 of these, that really looks like a different ink in this pen. That is the line width comparison with all 5 of these pens. So I want to at least test out, even if I'm not going to add them to my collection, I want to test out the broad nib. I want to test out the zoom nib. I want to test out the music nib, all 3 of those by Sailor, to see if I have a preference for those over these. But so far, I really like the extra fine for certain situations. If I'm going to write small, if I'm going to write carefully, if I'm going to write neatly, and if I'm going to write lightly, then this is wonderful. This is perfect. I really enjoy writing with this fine nib and the medium nib here. I think this one is going to be a fun one to use, especially with drier inks. I would love to explore this pen with drier inks. So let me also do this same writing sample on aerofil paper. Yes, I feel like I really do have to use a light hand with this nib, but it feels really, really good when I use wetter inks in this one. This is so good. I love this pen. This is really good. It's slicey on the upstroke, and with the extra fine, the upstroke is a bit drier. Upstroke here is fine. This is a bit slicey on the upstroke. There's just a little bit more resistance, a little bit more feedback on that upstroke. It's so thick and juicy. I'm just gonna pretend that this is a broad nib. It looks and feels really good though. So definitely with a little bit more spreading on the aerofil paper, my line widths actually do look a bit thicker on aerofil paper, just in general, for whatever ink that I choose to use. Inks tend to spread just a tad bit more here on aerofil paper than they do on Tomoe River paper. So if we take a look at the 2 of them side by side, you'll see that even the extra fine nib is a little bit broader on aerofil paper. But going from thinnest to thickest line widths, it's still the same order. The extra fine nib, the fine nib, then the medium fine, and then the cartridge converter Pro Gear medium, and then this Piston medium nib. Yeah, so I really feel like this medium nib is more like a broad nib, which is great for me because I want to be able to use up the ink in this pen whenever I use it. I want to make sure that Piston is all right. It looks like, can I draw this? The Piston is kind of shaped something like this, right? And it keeps going that way. So if the piston is going up and down here and it's drawing in ink, it's drawing in a bunch of ink, right? So the ink is supposed to stay on this side of the piston. Let me bring that a little bit closer so you can see it. So the piston knob goes in that direction, pulls ink in that direction. What I'm seeing so far, at least with this Sailor Realo, is that there is ink here. And I don't know if that's an issue or if this piston rod is actually shaped differently. So if the piston rod is shaped like this, so of course you're going to get ink back here. But if there is ink that is leaking back there and it's not supposed to be back there, it's not a guarantee that I will be able to clean this effectively. And it's also not a guarantee that this pen won't break down over time because of the moisture getting into places where it should not be. I don't even know if I can show you because the barrel is so doggone dark, but I can see it in person that there is ink all the way up to the back of this piston rod. Oh, these drawings are terrible. So it has not leaked beyond this barrier right here. So if I end up seeing ink back here, then we've got a problem. Because I don't even know if there are like metal parts back here or even if glue would start to corrode because of the chemicals in the ink. I have no idea. You know, I don't know what companies do to make everything work. I'm nervous, but I'm hoping for the best. That's what I've got so far. Oh, I wanted to show you. I don't know if you can tell, but there's like a little spring right here. So there is a spring in this cap, just like there is a spring in the platinum caps as well as the Esterbrook Estes, but you don't have to push this in to actually engage the threads like you do on an Estes. As you screw in the fountain pen, you'll be able to see it depress. Is that the word? Depress the spring up here. So it is airtight, and that's a wonderful thing. I am really glad to have this fountain pen as long as it functions properly and I don't see ink in places where it should not be. This is, I believe it's a great purchase. And I'm so glad that this medium nib is an honorary broad nib in my collection. I'm going to have some fun with this one. And special thanks again to Nadia for letting me use your 21 karat gold medium fine nib. This is a gorgeous pen. Let me just give you a better look at it. This is the Sailor Pro Gear Chocolate Framboise. It's got a chocolate brown body with this raspberry or berry colored finial rose gold trim. Oh, okay, it's got like little berries right there. That is the nib on this beautiful, beautiful fountain pen. So yeah, this concludes my introduction to the Sailor 1911 Realo fountain pen and a brief guest appearance of a new Sailor Pro Gear fountain pen. Oh, which ones were my favorites? Which ones were my favorites? I really like this medium nib, and I really like this extra fine nib. I really like the fine nib. Okay, so it really does. I don't have a favorite. After all of this, I can't say that I have a favorite. I have a use, or I have different moods, and depending on the mood, I will have a favorite. Right now, I'm in a very indecisive mood. I love this one. I love this one. And I love this one. It's going to take me a little time to get used to how large this one is. Let me just write big and free with this one for a moment, because that's what I love doing with the broader nibs in my collection. If I can just go big and free, it is always a much more pleasant experience when I do that with larger nibs. Yeah, so this is great for writing larger. I feel like I was a bit cramped right here, but this looks and feels really good. I love writing like this with larger nibs. That just makes me really happy. That makes me happy right there. So if I feel like writing large, I'm going to grab the Realo because this medium nib feels like a broad nib. If I want to write smaller, I'm probably going to grab a fine or an extra fine nib. I really love how wet this one looks and performs. I love the look and feel of this one with like those wetter, slightly more lubricated inks. I hope that this was at least helpful for you. It didn't make much of a difference for me because I can still say that I really like them. But my least favorite based on my experience right here is the medium fine, because it just seems like it is the middle of the road. I feel like I either want to go broader, larger, or I want to go smaller, finer. It's either one or the other for me. And that's in the middle. So instead of going straight for the middle, I'm going to go for something a little bit more extreme. So that is my preference. That is my preference. I don't want the average. I want thin and small or thick and big. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope that this was helpful or at least enjoyable for you. And I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.